Hi and welcome! I'm going to show you how to set up, customize and use Unity sliders in two different ways. One for continuous updates while the slider is being dragged, for example for volume changes, and another for a single update after the user has finished dragging. For example, if you want to play a sound at the end of dragging. If you're watching this to make a health or progress bar or something similar, I recommend watching my tutorial on those instead. They use an image component instead of a slider and offer many more options your game might enjoy. Sliders are really more for when you want to interact and change its value through interaction, less for just displaying a value in bar format. Let's start by creating a slider. Create a new canvas if you don't already have one by right-clicking in the hierarchy UI Canvas. I want our slider to fit into a specific size and resize itself as needed. To do so, create a new empty game object and call it sliderbox. I'll give it these values for width and height. Add a slider to it. I typically create a canvas and its items in separate steps to make sure my canvas is set up correctly for my use case. More on that in my canvas tutorial. This is what the default slider looks like in Unity. A bit blurry and certainly in need of some nice graphics, but functional. It does not resize itself yet though. Click on this icon up here and you open the anchoring menu. Look at a horizontal stretch first. Hold Alt, which switches your choices over to stretching in different directions, then click on this one. It will keep your slider centered in the middle of the parent object, but stretch it to fill the parent's width. If your slider is supposed to be vertical instead, click on the drop-down for direction, choose top to bottom or bottom to top, open the anchoring menu, hold Alt, and click on this option, which will stretch it into the height of your parent game object instead. At this point, we can change the size of our parent object as we need, and the slider will grow or shrink accordingly. As a smaller height, if you hold Alt while resizing, you will resize based on the location of your pivot point. That one's typically set in the center of your game object, but you can place it anywhere you need. More on that in my tutorial about anchors. The slider component. Let's have a look at the slider component itself. Interactable should be self-explanatory, but I've seen people who accidentally switched this off and had a hard time understanding why their slider wasn't working anymore. Make sure to look here in that case. The transition block is the same as it is for the button component. It handles the colors your slider will use based on its state. The default ones have served me quite well, and I rarely need to change anything in here. Just like button transitions, you can switch this over to changing sprites when the slider is being interacted with as well. I'll skip over navigation in this tutorial, as that really warrants its own. This essentially handles where the selection will jump to if your user uses a keyboard or buttons to navigate your UI, but it needs another component to make it work, and that would go too far for this tutorial. Fill rect and handle rect are already being set by default, and you typically don't need to change anything about this. These are the graphics for your handle and the bar filling up behind it. Direction changes the orientation of your slider and the location of what it considers as 0. Min and max value are just that, and you can set your slider to work only with whole numbers. For example, a volume slider would be a good example for a slider with this disabled, while a customization menu slider could work much better with this set to active. No matter which you choose, in your scripts, the slider value will always read as a float. In value, you can set the default starting value between your min and max values. I'll set my maximum to 10 and the value to 5 for the rest of this tutorial, as it makes seeing changes a bit easier. Lastly, you get a UnityEvent to hook up your scripts. This one is for onValueChanged, which triggers the script you hand to it on every change of your slider. We will look at how to grab values through script and how to change this from get it on every value change to get the value once the handle is being released in a moment. Customizing the graphics. Let's see what we have available to restyle our slider. We have a background, a fill area with a child element called fill, and a handle slide area with a child handle. The background is really just the image you want to use for your slider itself. This is basically your slider is set to 0 or background graphic. I'm going to use my own graphic for this. The fill area does not fill your whole slider. It actually stretches inside the slider itself, starting 5 pixels from the minimum and ending about 15 pixels from the maximum. Also, the fill itself is set up to have an initial fill even if your value is 0 by starting a few pixels in front. This is all for good reason, as these numbers make sure that in the default design of the slider, the fill of the slider doesn't behave strangely. Depending on the style of your handle graphic, you might have to figure out the numbers that would work well for your design. The things you should be looking out for is that your fill graphic will not overshoot your handle graphic, and that it does not move out of the background area or look strangely squashed at low numbers. My handle graphics are typically on the large and wide side, which is why I usually just stretch the whole width by clicking on the anchor and choosing Stretch Horizontal here. Fill gets the same treatment. Make sure to change the graphics of your fill as well. That's the part that is coloring your bar up to the handle. Switch out the handle graphic next. To get a square-shaped image box, make it as wide as your slider is high. That's 80 pixels in my case. You can also set your image to keep its aspect ratio, of course. How to grab and set values. I create a new TextMesh Pro child element in our slider to display the value of the slider itself. This is a simple script that should just display the value my slider sits at. It has a reference to the slider it belongs to, a reference to a TextMesh Pro field, a reset method that gets called once the script gets attached to the game object and fills out our slider references automatically, as well as the method to get the slider's value and show it in our text field. To not get lost in a sea of decimal points, I limit the display to showing only 2 decimal places like this. Attach the script to the slider, click on plus in the event and drag the script in. Pick the corresponding method from the drop-down menu and you are already done. In-game, we can now change the value of our slider and get the correct value displayed. By code. Maybe you don't want to use the UnityEvent straight in the inspector. For this, you can access the value by script. Let's get back to Rider for this. In Start, we check if our slider reference is null. If it is not, we need to add a so-called listener. It listens to an event. In our case, it's the onValueChanged event of the slider. If the event gets triggered, a method should be called, which will be our initial one. You can also change the initial value of your slider in Start by accessing its value and assigning a number to it. Every listener needs to be removed if it is not longer needed. We get rid of ours when our game object gets destroyed like this. Go back to Unity and remove the entry from the onValueChanged box. Start your game and test. It should work just the way it did before. And if you have found this useful already, please click like and consider subscribing. But what if you only want to get the value once your player releases the handle? Getting tons of method calls might bog down your system needlessly after all. Also, if you want to play a sound once the handle is being let go, this is the method you would need. Back to Rider in our script. Add the iPointerUp handler interface at the top. This one comes with Unity and handles events that get triggered when, for example in this case, the pointer on the game object is being released. It comes with a needed method, onPointerUp. It needs pointer event data, even though we don't have to use it in the script. Save and switch back to Unity. Hit play and give it a test. And that's it. Now you know how to either get continuous updates from your slider or just one final update once the user is done dragging. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this tutorial and found it helpful, feel free to like, subscribe and drop a comment. Have a great week!